All right, how you all doing today? This week we're going to do a two-part lecture on the environmental crisis as it relates to international relations. So today's talk is going to be about one of the most pressing environmental issues that we've ever faced, which is, of course, climate change and the what the international community is doing politically to address the situation, right? So, first of all, you guys, I'm sure, have all heard about climate change, right? 98 point, I think it's 8.98.8% of scientists, major scientists, or some figure like that, validate climate change as an actual phenomenon, right? Um, the only people who are really against climate change are those scientists who are funded by the fossil fuel industry. Any scientist that you guys find, just an interesting fact, that denies that climate change is occurring, usually go do your research and you can trace back all of their funding to big oil or coal companies, right? So it is real. It's not up for debate, as many people want to say it is. Climate change is real. Now, what scientists are saying, right, is that climate change uh, is being caused by our over reliance on fossil fuels, right? So this is man made, man made. Now, the only, you know, really the only source of disagreement between scientists is how do we move forward from here? What is the best path to follow to minimize the effects of climate change? That's where the debate within the science community rests. How do we respond? Most scientists, like I said, over 98%, are in agreement that climate change is happening, A, and B, that humans, us, right, we are to blame for this problem, right? Actually, even more accurately, when we say humans, big corporations are to blame for this problem. Um, Agribusiness, those huge, giant agricultural meat packing farms, right? They produce immense CO2, um, as do, of course, our, huge reliance on oil and coal. That's to blame for it, right? So really, it's corporations who are promoting this mass consumption. And if you want to even get down to a more specific, capitalism, right? The this idea of unlimited consumption of goods, uh, going global. This, basically, guys, globalization, right? We had 2 weeks we spent on that face to face when we were still meeting together. This building our whole economy around massive consumption, uses incredible amounts of resources, and all of that extraction, our cars are, having to, um, having to have an entire economy based on fossil fuels has driven this entire climate change really crisis. Scientists are saying in as little as 20 to 30 years, this may be irreversible. That floods, tornadoes, wildfires, all of these events will become more and more and more extreme as we go on, right? Um, they expect, you know, various forms of skin cancers to become out of control. All of these terrible effects, mass extinctions. We talk a lot about the impact on humans, but mass extinctions. Scientists say we're going through a sixth mass extinction, where a shocking number of reptiles, mammals, insects are just going extinct because of the effects of climate change, right? So it's already having an impact, right? Um, so the question then becomes, okay, so what can we do about it, right? What can we possibly do about it? Well, um, the mainstream approach, and you guys are reading about it this week, was a major agreement called the Paris Accords. Um, and this was an agreement by nearly all of the United Nations countries, member states. Um, Currently, there's 189 nations who have signed on to the Paris Accords. And it's an agreement among these nations to significantly reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, which means that these nations are pledging to uh, transition from fossil fuel based economies to more alternative energy. Think like solar, wind, hydropower, right? More sustainable alternative forms of energy. Now, the catch is that as all these countries have pledged to reduce their CO2 emissions, that's the harmful gas released into the atmosphere caused by fossil fuels, right? The burning of fossil fuels. These countries, there's nothing binding them. That's the catch. There's nothing saying these countries have to achieve their results of becoming less fossil fuel dependent. They're just like kind of on the honor code that they're going to do this. So it's not binding, which is definitely problematic, right? However, just the fact that these countries are signing on, even if it's symbolic and there's nothing to really force these countries to do anything at all, even if it's just for public relations, at least you can make the case that it's at least acknowledging that we have a problem and that we have to do something to move forward. Well, guess what, guys? Anyone want to take a guess who the one country who has backed out of the Paris Accords are? What is the one nation? The United States, right? We are the world's only country currently in the entire world who has backed out of the whole Paris Accords. Now, it's significant because the US is what? We're the biggest, the world's second biggest polluter in the world, right? And we're also the second biggest producer of CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. Oh my gosh. So we're the second biggest polluter, but we don't want anything to do with this. So when did we pull out? Well, we've officially, right when President Trump got elected, one of his first things he did was he said we were pulling out of the Paris Accords. As you can probably guess, guys, Trump has never been much of an environmentalist, and even my conservative students in the room right now, our teller room, whatever you guys want to call it, even my conservative students have to admit that one of the biggest flaws in Trump's policies is his views on the environment. He has shown very little regard, for environmental affairs, probably because he's always cultivated very close ties to big oil companies and coal, right? Trump's real estate uh, empire has always had deep ties and investments with big oil, right? So that's led him to pretty much remove us. Now, officially, Trump has indicated he's moved ahead now, 2020, to officially back the United States out of the Accords. And 2020 is significant now because this was the year where all the countries were going to actually start to enforce in their own nations lowering greenhouse gas emissions. So this was the year where the Paris Accords were supposed to kick in, and the United States has just removed itself from the entire thing, right? Now, many of his supporters say, this is a good thing. The UN Accord was non-binding anyways. There was nothing that was going to force the countries to do it. So why even bother with it? And UN really shouldn't have a say over our domestic policies at all, right? And Trump and his supporters have said, if we are forced to curb back our global emissions, that could slow down our economy. That was one of Trump's arguments too, that the having to agree to climate change accords would seriously impede economic growth, right? Now, um, I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts are. Obviously, you know, the world is outraged that Donald Trump has pulled the U.S. out of the Accords because they said, like, this is an issue that we just simply cannot play politics with. Like nuclear weapons, this is nuclear proliferation. This is an existential issue. Like, we could kill ourselves with climate change gets too out of control, make this planet uninhabitable for humans. So why are we even playing politics with this issue, right? Um, and um, this is definitely an issue we'll be talking about a little bit more. So hope you guys found this kind of interesting. What are your thoughts? And we'll continue on.